Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to meet President Donald Trump at the White House on Tuesday. This marks the first foreign leader visit of Trump's second term at a critical point for the Gaza ceasefire. Netanyahu is facing political pressure at home, with his far-right allies threatening to leave his coalition over the ceasefire deal. Despite a temporary ceasefire, Netanyahu maintains that Israel retains the right to resume fighting against Hamas. Trump has claimed credit for the 6-week ceasefire, which has already seen hostages released and humanitarian aid flow into Gaza. Key talks are expected to shape the next stage of the ceasefire agreement. Joining us first, we have Aditya Wadwan, our correspondent. Aditya, I'd like to ask mainly about the conversation that Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump are going to have. What do you think the significance of this meeting is?
Well, it is actually a very significant meeting between Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, because it is the first meeting of Israeli PM Benjamin Netanyahu since in his second term, since the Trump has become president of the United States of America for the second term. However, it needs to be seen from here on where these discussions are headed towards. But it is a very pivotal discussion that happened and will continue to happen between the two leaders, because as Trump had said during his election speeches, that all hell will break loose if till he takes over as the president, if all the Israeli hostages are not released. So as we can see that so far the Israeli hostages have been some of the Israeli hostages have been released. The ceasefire deal between the two sides is in progress. At the same time, it needs to be seen by when will it be completed. It will take some time as by when would the entire situation be open. So far, this Donald Trump is known to be absolutely pro-Israel when it comes to adopting approach towards Israel. We saw what in his first term also he had an absolutely pro-Israel approach. He had, facilitated the friendship between the UAE and Israel, So this needs to be seen from here on as to how this entire situation in the Middle East proceeds. Yes, Josh.
Also joining us to discuss this topic, we have Yeshaya Rosenman, who's the project director at India-Israel Military Project, joining us live from Israel. Thank you very much for your time, Yeshaya. I'd like to look at what Israel is looking to gain out of this next stage of potential ceasefire negotiations. What do you think the goal for Netanyahu is, and what do you think he's going to try and get from Donald Trump in this conversation?
Hi, good afternoon. So the only thing that Israel is posed to gain from the second stage of the hostage deal, if it happens, would be the release of the hostages. On all other fronts, many in Israel would say that it would be a loss, a net loss, meaning that Hamas would remain in power. And given that Hamas's ideology is total and perpetual war against Israel, it would just be a countdown till the next round of conflict. So this is precisely what Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, this is the gun that he has put on the table. He said that if Hamas remains in power, he will topple Netanyahu's government. So Netanyahu is here in a very, very delicate state. Given that there is part of the Israeli public demanding the hostage deal, whereas his coalition and another part of the Israeli public want Hamas toppled and their regime ended in Gaza, whatever the day after will look like. So that is on the Gaza front. Beyond that, this is Netanyahu's first meeting with Trump in his second term. After Trump had left his first term, there were some signs of acrimony. Trump was angry, losing second elections, and he had said disparaging remarks about Prime Minister Netanyahu. So this is first of all a meeting, to get back on good terms with President Trump. There will be a joint press conference, the first such press conference with a foreign leader that President Trump is having. On the agenda will be, of course, what is going to be Trump's signature foreign policy initiative in his second term, normalization agreements with Saudi Arabia, what he was called the Abraham Accord agreements, expanding them to Saudi Arabia. That will be Trump's showcase piece of foreign policy. So that is on the agenda, establishing what the terms for that could be. Beyond that, there's the possibility of attacking Iran, either and. The nuclear facilities and or the oil refineries in Iran to cripple Iran to stop it from spreading terror across the world. Beyond that, and also, of course, additional negotiations about Gaza. Prime Minister Netanyahu is meeting Steve Witkoff, the special envoy to the Middle East, and there's a question of what the day after will look like in Gaza, the possibility of relocating Gazans after the war, and it should also be noticed that in leading up to this meeting today, President Trump has already talked about signing a $1 billion deal, a weapons deal with Israel, allowing Israel 4,700 one-ton bombs and armed bulldozers that the Biden administration had withheld from Israel. So there already have been signs of goodwill from the Trump administration.
Yes, Yashai, I very quickly want to build on that. Obviously, we know Trump's rhetoric over Hamas. He's made threats even before being inaugurated as the 47th President of the United States. And we know that Israel have been calling this a temporary ceasefire. So is there a potential that this meeting has a military goal as well?
Yes, very much so. President Trump has been quoted just yesterday as saying there are no guarantees the Gaza ceasefire will hold. So yes, that is definitely on the table. A possibility that the first stage of the ceasefire will be the last, and Israel will resume the military efforts and topple the Hamas regime in Gaza. Yes.
Also joining us to discuss these conversations is Ambassador Prateep Kapoor, who's a former diplomat. Ambassador Kapoor, thank you very much for joining us. I want to take it away from the talks that are happening between Netanyahu and Trump and the sort of press conference that we're going to have in front of the media, and take it to the more sort of undisclosed conversations that are happening between delegates from Israel, Hamas, in Doha. Potentially, do you think this will have more impact on a ceasefire than the conversation that's happening in America?
Yes, it's going to, get things moving faster because of the earlier relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, which has mostly been on an even keel. Trump's primary interest is, of course, always, how it impacts America and whether it is in the interest of America. Now, if there is peace in Gaza, if there is some solution to the long-lasting war there, if they both the sides come to an agreement, and if the second phase of the negotiations begin in Qatar, and if all the remaining hostages are released, there is some permanent end to the war, and there's some ceasefire, and all the countries in the region go back to development aspects. So that sort of focus will be, of course, in the interest of Trump. Now, if Netanyahu plays ball, it'll be easier for Trump to move ahead and support Netanyahu. There are, of course, strong supporters of Israel in the current cabinet, and Trump would also like to move ahead on the Abraham Accords. The negotiations and the discussions between Saudi Arabia and Israel, just when they were about to conclude, had got stopped at that time. He would want to revive that. He would also support Israel in many other ways on the international stage. He did a good thing by, putting out that warning that if Hamas does not stop the war, they will have to pay very big time for anything that they do. So that propelled them to the negotiating table. Otherwise, they were very reluctant or hesitant because delay of any negotiations or agreements they thought were playing to their interest. Suddenly they changed their attitude and they agreed to discuss further and negotiate further. So I think overall it's going to be good for West Asia and going to be good for the world. And Trump is doing a good job there on West Asia to propel the peace forward. Thank you, Joshua.
Ambassador Kapoor, very quickly before we move on. Obviously, Israel have said that they're going to continue with military action after the ceasefire if Hamas still remain in control. What do you think Hamas can do in these ceasefire negotiations that are happening in Doha to make sure, like as you mentioned, there is an actual end to this war and it's not just a continuation of what we saw before the ceasefire deal, but now without Hamas holding the hostages?
Yes, so I guess one thing which Hamas will have to realize is that, like in Lebanon, they have agreed to reimpose that agreement which had been violated earlier by Hezbollah. They will have to, come to terms that any further violation of the peace or any further attacks or any further sort of actions which they took on October 7th of 2023 will not be tolerated this time. So if they do not behave themselves, if they do not keep the peace, if they violate the agreement, then I think the penalties or the impact on their future would be much worse this time. I think because America will be fully behind Israel again to sort of sort them out so that they do not emerge as a threat again in the future. So I think it will be in their interest to come to the negotiating table even after the second phase is over and see how they can reopen the Rafah border, how they can get the aid going again, how they can look after the people who have been displaced, how they can rebuild the country, how they can get back into the development space. So there are a lot of things that they have to do. There are a lot of challenges. The military aspect of it, I think they have to realize is not a solution. If they have to move towards a two-state solution, they will need peace and they will need to be behaving like a proper political party and not like a jihadi terrorist organization.
Ambassador Kapoor and Yeshaya Rosenman, thank you both very much.